Thank you very much. And of course, Program Director and Excellency President Yoweri Museveni, His Excellency the Vice President of South Sudan, our friend here, the Ambassador Abdulaziz, honorable guests, captains of industry and financial institutions, ladies and gentlemen. I think my task has been made very easy because the President has spoken about most things that need to be spoken about, even though he was relating them mainly to Uganda, but quite a lot of them can be related to other parts of the continent. The evidence of Africa's progress over the past decade is irrefutable. The situation in Africa changed mainly during the periods 1995 to 2005 and beyond, as a result of political and economic reforms that led to greater peace, stability, and democratic governance. That tamed inflation, allowed for increased domestic investments from both public and private sectors, saw improvements in revenue collections, and improved trade prospects. These changes have provided a platform for the economic growth that a large number of African economies have experienced over the past decade. Africa also weathered the economic crisis, 2007, 2008, with the adverse impact of the crisis through commodity pricing lasting less than a year for the continent. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, available data, therefore, positions Africa as a new growth pole for this century, where returns on investment is virtually in every sector is better than most parts of the world, whether it's in infrastructure, in ICT, retail, in health, in manufacturing. You can get higher than any part of the world, higher returns for your investments. A number of mega trends are also in Africa's favor as we speak. Africa's population is set to double in the next few decades. Its middle class is growing exponentially. It is rapidly urbanizing, and it has a very young, energetic, and creative population. And Africa, as the President has said, remains well endowed with mineral resources accounting for more than 5% of both production and reserves in oil and gas, as well as a number of other critical minerals. We know that you can't have a cell phone unless you visit the DRC and get some of the components there. So many of our reserves are of very high quality, and since Africa has less exploration than elsewhere, it still has a good prospect for discovery of additional resources, as we can see what is happening in Mozambique, in East Africa, and elsewhere. The ICT revolution in Africa showed that with technology, the continent can leapfrog several development stages, and that this is also possible in sectors such as agriculture, infrastructure, and energy. We know that Africa is now the second largest market for mobile phones, but we've also seen how young people in Kenya and elsewhere have been innovating, bringing up very innovative programs through this technology. Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, there are but a few reasons why it makes business sense to invest in Africa, and to do so for the long term. There are a number of specific areas we would like you to consider. Firstly, the African Union remains committed to accelerating continental integration. with a view to significantly increase intra-African trade and tourism. Progress is being made towards the African Economic Community envisaged in the Abuja Treaty through various regional economic communities. I think the President has mentioned that. For example, the Economic Community in West Africa, ECOWAS, already introduced measures that allow free movement of people, goods, and services across the 15 member states. They've launched their free trade area and plan to launch the customs union by 2015. The COMESA SADC ECA tripartite agreement envisages a free trade zone from the Cape to Cairo, encompassing 26 countries, 526 million people, and more than $1 trillion in output. And of course, by 2017, we hope to be having a free trade area in Africa as a whole. Secondly, the integration initiatives should result in increased trade and building in the value chains across Africa. At the moment, as African countries and regions seek to industrialize, in many sectors, almost in all sectors, they still rely on imports of inputs from outside. Greater integration and regional infrastructure that connects countries and economies and people will make sourcing of these inputs from the continent considerably easier and cheaper. Investment in these regional value chains will therefore result in lucrative returns as domestic African markets and the middle class grows. Thirdly, Africa is still home to close to 60% of world's unused arable land. I won't say any more. I think the President said a lot about agriculture, except to say that we would like to empower women in this area. So I would like to just say we need to invest and assist women farmers in addition to everybody else to not only grow food, but also to process it. So the processing that the President is talking about should not only end up with men, it should end up with both men and women, young and old. And of course, there are still key impediments to growth, and the major one is infrastructure. Even though, as we speak, there are 800 active infrastructure projects across the continent. But of course, it's a big continent, 30 million square kilometers. But even with that, there are still huge backlogs in infrastructure, both roads, energy, ICT, and social infrastructure. At the same time, growth in Africa's infrastructure sector is expected to reach at least 9% over the next decade, 4 times faster than expected growth in the resource sector. The fifth issue is to ensure ethical corporate investment and social responsibility. I'm afraid to say, but I must say it, that disproportionately huge sums of money leave the continent illicitly, over 60% through corporate tax evasion and under-reporting or undervaluing what is produced. This directly contributes to Africa's continued impoverishment. We must therefore work together to ensure that the private sector pays fair and transparent taxes in every sector in Africa, that it contributes to development of communities where they operate, and that it helps to implement sustainable environmental policies. Finally, None of the above will be possible without a skills revolution. Without investments in women and young people, Africa must train millions of young artisans, technicians, engineers, scientists in every single sector to enable the continent to industrialize, add value to its vast natural resources, develop its private sector, feed itself and the world, and construct and maintain its infrastructure. It is therefore a call I would like to make that business should not only invest in entrepreneurship and young startups, but also to work with the African governments and the African Union and other institutions to establish public-private sector partnerships for vocational, technical, scientific training that will provide the necessary skills, research and innovation in the industries. So, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, as we celebrate 50 years since the founding of the Organization of the African Unity, we look towards the future as Africans with confidence. And we invite all of you to accompany us on this exciting journey towards a prosperous Africa at peace with itself. Thank you.
Doing business in Africa. You can't afford to be without Africa Investor.